Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Thanks for being here for our second session of the night, where we're going to be talking with one of our faculty members here on our campus. Julie Jacob is with us. She is a faculty member within our occupational therapy program, also the chair or the director of that program. We're going to be talking with her and kind of she and I are going to have a conversation to talk about some of the things that faculty expect, some of the differences between what it takes in undergrad versus graduate school. And I will put this in mind that, as I said, Julie is a part of the occupational therapy program. There may be different expectations depending on the program that you are in. So take what you're hearing today with that in mind, and understand that because there are some nuances based on the different programs as well. So I'm really excited to have her here. And as we've done in the past, make sure to use the chat. So if you've got questions, burning questions that you want to ask Julie, feel free to put them in there. I've got some questions that I've prepared that we will ask, but I want this to be interactive, and I want you to have an opportunity to be able to learn from Julie as well. Julie, thanks so much for being here today.
No problem. Great to be here. I'm happy to discuss relationships with faculty in graduate school because it can be quite different than undergraduate for sure. So hopefully I will be able to help.
Wonderful. I guess first and foremost, to set the stage, can you talk about some of the expectations that you and other faculty may have when you're thinking about graduate students and graduate students coming into a graduate program?
Yeah, I think in graduate school there is a lot more self-directed learning. So we kind of expect the students to take the driver's seat and kind of be responsible for a lot of their own learning. A lot of that comes with time management, right? Kind of laying out what your semester is going to look like from the start, having a plan in place and prioritizing your education. I know in graduate school, a lot of students have a lot of balls in the air, a lot of things going on. Some people have to work, some people don't have to work. Some people have children, some people don't. I mean, there's a lot of differences and a lot of personal demands. But kind of taking the lead on your education is important, and not so much relying on faculty to, I guess, for lack of a better word, spoon feed the information, because everything's already laid out for you pretty much in the syllabi.
So, in you saying that and students having to take the lead, what are some strategies that you feel that students can do to be able to kind of set the stage to as they enter into graduate school to be able to take control? Because taking control may be a little different in undergrad as it is in graduate school. What does that mean to you in from your perspective as a faculty member?
I think communicating with your faculty is really important. I think not being afraid to ask clarifying questions and not wait until something is due or it's the last minute, or you don't understand something and then you're down to the wire, because faculty kind of expect, I mean, I expect my students to ask me right out of the gate, what do you mean by this, Dr. Jacob? Can you explain your expectations a little bit more? And faculty's happy to do that. We'd rather be proactive with you than reactive in the moment where you're up against a deadline to complete an assignment.
Well, and the other thing that I'll put out there to all of you is this, is that it's also really important that when life happens, and life will inevitably happen in graduate school, that if things are happening in your life that are going to impact your success in graduate school, talk to your faculty, talk to the director of the program, talk to your faculty advisor, talk to others that are a part of the program to let them know what's going on. Because if they don't know, they're not going to be able to support you. And they want to support you. They want you to be successful in this program, but you have to advocate for yourself and be willing to advocate for yourself to be able to get that support. So that's one piece of advice that I throw in there as well. Now,
Mhm.
Julie, what strategies can students use to ask for that feedback from faculty without feeling overwhelmed or discouraged when they're kind of putting themselves out there?
Some students are very comfortable just in class, asking those questions, which, I mean, I can tell you, and you probably have heard this before, if you're thinking about the question, somebody else is usually thinking the same question. So never be embarrassed to ask a question, because you're probably helping out one of your classmates at the same time. But if you're uncomfortable, schedule, a meeting, stay after class, come before class so that you can catch your faculty one-on-one. Everybody has office hours, and those don't necessarily have to be in person. A lot of office hours are virtual, so you can schedule appointments. I've had students, all the time during a semester that will say, Dr. Jacob, do you have 5 minutes, on Wednesday or whatever to go over something? And faculty are very happy to do that. Most graduate programs also, at least in my department, will have, advisors assigned to you so that if there is something going on, that you can go to your advisor specifically to talk to them and discuss any issues that you may have being successful, and they can point you in the right direction. But like Dr. Lewis said, communication is really essential in graduate school because it's a lot. The demands are much higher in graduate school than they are in undergrad. There's more work and half the time to do it in typically. So you want to make sure that you're communicating regularly with your faculty, because we don't, like Dr. Lewis said, we don't know what we don't know. So if I have a student that's struggling and I have no idea, and we're down, weeks are going by, it'd be more advantageous for the student to come to me, or even just shoot an email if you're not comfortable with a verbal conversation, to let me know what's going on so that I can best address it and give you the tools to be successful.
So let's talk about those office hours, because you talked about possibly going to office hours. How can students effectively use office hours and other, let's say, other faculty resources that are available to them to enhance their learning and research?
I would say come prepared with questions. I mean, like, if you're in class and you need clarification, start jotting down notes of things that are unclear or that you need assistance with. And that way, when you have that appointment, you're not going to forget something. You're going to have all of those bullet points in a row of the things that you want to address, and make use of that time effectively. I think that's helpful.
Now, what advice would you give to students for building those strong working relationships with their faculty advisors?
Just taking advantage of the fact that you have an advisor. Is number one. I mean, typically, like for my program, I can speak for OT. Our advisors will touch base and reach out with every single student in the program at least once a semester. Usually it's like if they haven't heard from the student, it's like mid-semester, midterm time frame, they're reaching out. How's everything going? Anything that we can do to help support you? I would say even if everything is going swimmingly, right? Take advantage of that appointment, of that offer, of that reach out, and just have a chat with them, even if it's only for 5 minutes, to let them know like what's going on in your life, how you're doing in the semester, things that are going well, things that maybe are not going well, because that allows your faculty to get to know you. And I think it's in graduate school, we like to know our students on a much deeper level, maybe than what you've experienced in undergrad.
Now, what opportunities exist for graduate students to, well, let me step back. There are opportunities that exist for graduate students to be able to work with faculty on research, on projects, on publications. There's opportunities that are out there, but sometimes students don't always know how best to find those and how to approach faculty about working with them on those type of projects. What would you say to those students?
Ask. Just ask the faculty, are there any, we have graduate student research assistants, kind of across the university. Ask when do those postings come out? What types, you might not know what types of projects until the postings come out, but if you're interested in those positions, ask. In my department, we have students, it's required for our curriculum that our students are working directly with faculty on research, aside from a GSRA position. It's part of the curriculum. So they get to work directly with faculty. If you hear faculty talking about a project that they're working on, and you want to be involved despite, being a GSRA and paid position. If I want to work with you, Dr. Jacob, on that irregardless, because I'm interested in the topic that you're researching. Go, come and tell me, or come and tell your faculty, hey, do you need any assistance with this? I'd love to hear more about it, or I'd love to help out. You're going to get a lot more experience that way. If you're interested in research in particular, for sure, by just asking, do not be afraid to ask.
Now, sometimes things can happen, and graduate students may find themselves in a situation where they may have a conflict or a misunderstanding with a faculty member. How do you approach those, or how would you tell a student to approach those type of situations?
Professionally, for sure. You want to make sure that all of your communication is professional. If you've tried to resolve, I'm trying to think of a specific instance this might happen, aside from maybe a grade, or something like that, where if you've approached your faculty and you're not getting a solution, then the next step you would go to would be the department director, or chair, and explain the situation there and see if a resolution can't happen from there. Typically it is if you go to the director, but your best bet, don't jump. I have a military background, so I always say don't jump the chain of command. That's not a good idea. Always, go directly to the person, which in this case would be a faculty member, just to ask clarifying questions, explain your side of whatever the issue is, if there was a misunderstanding. And talk it out that way. But your next step, if you're not getting a resolution after that type of attempt, you go to the director.
Now, we've been talking about some of the relationships that they're going to be building, students are going to be building in their academic classes. And I guess one question that comes to mind is, how can graduate students best prepare themselves to meet the academic and research demands of the programs that they may be entering?
I guess it might, it's really just kind of dedication and getting ahead of the assignments. A lot of students, when they first come into graduate school, for instance, like they won't do the readings in advance. You have the syllabi, right? So you have the topic that you're going to be addressing that week. It's already posted in your syllabi. You already have the readings there, and students will come into the class and not have done anything and expect that the professor is going to just lay out all of the information that they're going to need to know for the exam or assignment or whatever. You're doing yourself a huge disservice if you do not do the assigned readings ahead of time. Because you're not going to be able to ask important questions. You're not going to be able to necessarily, ask those clarifying questions. You might not even know some of the material, depending on what the topic is for that class, might go right over your head because it's complex, right? So just even having some sort of a baseline of what the topic is for that particular lecture, or that particular class, is going to help you out, because you're already going to come in to know, okay, that sounds familiar to me. Oh, I remember reading that, a couple nights ago. And you're going to be more inclined to digest that information better. So I think, yeah, that's a huge mistake that students, and they still make it still. And I get it, life happens and it's hard, and sometimes the readings are extensive, but it definitely will benefit you if you can come into class already prepared with questions, already prepared with that baseline knowledge.
And that's one of the things that I think is a big wake-up call for a lot of graduate students. And maybe you can relate to this too, is that there's a difference between the way that you're educated as an undergraduate student and the way you're educated as a graduate student. The way I usually explain it to students when I'm talking to them is the fact that in undergrad, a lot of times it's sit and get. You're going to sit there. Dr. Jacob's going to be in front of the classroom. She's going to be talking to you about a topic and pushing that knowledge to you. In graduate school, that's not going to be the case for the most part. It's going to be a collaborative process. Can you talk about that collaborative process, Dr. Jacob?
Yeah, so I typically I teach an adult conditions course where we pretty much cover everything that from adolescence to adulthood, all the conditions that an occupational therapist might see, right? So I have all of my PowerPoints kind of prepared with the highlights, but we do a lot of discussion in class. I don't, it would be so boring for me to just sit up there and like, this is what a stroke is. And this is, it just, that's not going to be engaging to the students. They can listen to me for so long, but it's a 4-hour class. So I like to have a discussion. Like, what's your experience? Who here has a family member that may have suffered from a cerebrovascular accident? What did that look like for you? What might you see? What do you think you're going to see? How, to try to get the critical thinking and clinical reasoning behind it to really get them to start to think like a clinician. Now, some of you may not be going into health related fields, and that's fine, but in your own areas of study, that's probably what's going to be happening as well, where they're going to be looking to have more of a conversation with you in class to kind of solidify the topics and bring it to like this real world. This is what you're actually going to see. This is how you're actually going to apply the material versus just the rote information. This is what you need to know for an exam. I mean, I tell students all the time, this is these are things that you need to know for your entire career. This is no longer like, I'm just going to test on this and forget it, right? You're building upon all of these concepts semester after semester. You have to have that recall and that deep understanding of the material now. So the more that you can apply that to kind of a real world scenario, like this is what my career is going to look like. These are the things that I'm going to have to do. This is how this makes sense to me. That's what your faculty is going to be trying to engage you in now at this level of your education.
Which goes back to what Dr. Jacob was saying about the importance of reading and then being able to, sometimes it's reading it more than once, where you're having to read it again, and maybe even read it a third time, where you go deeper and deeper the more that you are going to be reading it. You read it first to, they kind of understand it, kind of understand what's being said. Second, to kind of look a little bit deeper. And third, go further and bring in those concepts of how has this impacted my life? Well, how have I seen this? So you can bring those examples to the conversation as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we've talked over or yesterday and today in some different sessions that we've had, we've talked about the importance of time management. How do you recommend students manage their time effectively, especially when they are balancing all of those different things you said at the very beginning, the coursework, the research, the personal life, whatever else may be? What do you recommend to students?
Do not procrastinate. Um, if at all possible, do not procrastinate. Especially, a lot of graduate level courses will typically have a project attached, one or two, at least. It's not just taking an exam now. We're doing a lot of application type of work. So when you know about those projects in advance, and typically you're gonna know on the first day when you're going over your syllabi, like I have a research paper due, I have a presentation that I've got to do, I have to work in this group for this project. I would get ahead of it. I mean, I've had students complain, well, we our research papers were due week 10. I'm like, yes, you've had 10 weeks to do it. Why are you coming to me at week 9? You could have turned that in week 2. I would have been happy. I would have graded that, had it done for you, no problem. You would have had it off your plate. So if you can get ahead of things, if you have a light week where you don't have a ton going, knock those things out and turn them in early. It's going to help you out in the long run because typically, how semesters typically go, right? Your midterm, you're going to have heavy, probably project work and things due all around the same time. So looking at your different courses, laying out those due dates in a calendar so that you know when those projects are due. That's really important. If you don't have a calendar, I would strongly suggest that you start using one and plugging in, take a look at all of your syllabi, plug in those due dates for everything so that you can see when your work is going to be heavier in a semester and then get ahead of those early on.
What I just heard Dr. Jacob say, deconstruct the project, deconstruct the assignments, break it down, and be able to put it into parts so that you can see when do you need to accomplish what when. So make sure, like Dr. Jacob said, grab that calendar, get a calendar if you don't have one yet, so you can balance it. Don't just use your task lists on your phone. That's one way to do it, but probably not the most effective in being able to truly see it in front of you. So highly encourage you to go old school, get some paper and get a paper calendar if you need to, or even, a day timer or whatever it may be that would work to be able to truly break that down for you and break down the 10 weeks in a term, potential like right around 10 weeks of a term, to be able to look and see how are you going to accomplish what is in the syllabus.
Right.
Now, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, even us as faculty do that. Like for our research, if I didn't put blocks of time into my calendar to work on my manuscripts and my presentations and things like that, it would never get done because there's constantly things that come up in my day, and I'm sure in all of your days as well, that will come up and that will eat up your time. So you have to block out chunks of time and guard it. That is your guarded time. Do not let anybody touch that time from you so that you can get your projects done or your papers done or your studying done or your readings done. It's very, very important to kind of set yourself those own personal boundaries. Like nobody's going to touch this 2 hour block of time for me because I'm dedicating it to this.
Well, and I would put out there too that block off personal time too. Find the time that if for you exercise is critical for you to have that clear mind, block it off and make sure that you have that time set for yourself so that it doesn't get filled, because inevitably it could get filled.
Mhm.
And so sometimes it's looking at your entire week, and it may sound crazy, but if you say, I've got to see this one television show per week, that is the one thing that is one of the joy pieces in my week, and I need to see this show. Okay, block it off. But then you got to look at it. Okay, where am I blocking in the rest of the things to be able to get my reading done, my work done, my other things done? But then that allows you to be able to see you've only got 24 hours in a day. So looking at the 7 days of the week and breaking that down for yourself to be able to conceptualize what that week is going to look like, it will help you in the long run.
Yeah, I think it's great that you mentioned that too, Dr. Lewis, about giving yourself like a leisure time. It's actually in our curriculum for occupational therapy. We have an assignment where we actually assign students that they have to choose a leisure activity and they must do it every week. And then they have to report on it at the end of the semester because you need that balance just for your own mental health too. And it is easy as a graduate student, or just in your career in general, you get so wrapped up in work because you have all of these demands on your time, but it is important in order to be successful to allow yourself that fun time too, whether it be exercise or whatever your favorite activity might be, yoga or taking your dog for a walk or whatever it is, that you do that as well, because it can get very stressful and that has its own impact on your ability to perform well.
Now, you've seen a lot of different students in your career that come into graduate programs, and many times they may be perfectly fine. Jump right in and they don't have any issues. But other times there's some common challenges that you probably see students facing as they make that transition into graduate school. What are some of those common challenges that you tend to see students struggling with in your program? And what do you typically say to those students about how they can overcome them?
Hmm. Well, I think that balance can be very, very difficult depending on what's going on with the student personally. Trying to find the balance between the demands of graduate school and just their own personal life. And that can be challenging. And sometimes just talking through with a student, if you have a trusted faculty member or your advisor, just talk. We've all been there. That's the thing. Your faculty has all done it. We've all been there and had these, incredible demands put on us to get our degrees and to get to where you want to be. So we can certainly relate to all of that. Some of it is anxiety. Students can get really anxious about assignments or feeling like they're not, what am I doing here? I'm not good enough, to be here. I don't think that I can do this. Um, and that's not the case. You wouldn't have gotten into your programs if you couldn't do it, right? If the faculty didn't think that you deserved to be there. So it's just utilizing the tools. Some students have never necessarily had to have accommodations or didn't use accommodations in their undergraduate for whatever reason, but they may need them now. And so we recommend visiting our Office of Accessibility Services and getting those in place. If you are going into a career field that requires like a board exam, like OT or the health careers, or some sort of a certification exam, most of those agencies will not provide for those exams unless you've had them during your academic program. And that is nothing to be ashamed of, by the way, like to need accommodations. It's just another tool in your toolbox. So, and the faculty are happy to accommodate and assist with pointing you in the right direction to get those types of things taken care of. But those are some of the challenges. I see a lot of testing anxiety in graduate school because the stakes tend to be higher, right? Like your grades have to be higher. My students have to maintain a 3.0. They can get nothing less than a B minus in a class, otherwise it's considered a fail. So the stakes are a little bit higher in graduate school, and they struggle with that and just the idea of that and the pressure of that. But talking to faculty is, again, that communication piece. Like we can't help you if we don't know. And sometimes I've just had just a normal conversation I want my students to feel like I'm family. That's kind of how I approach my students, and letting them know it's okay and we're here for you and what can we do. And just having those conversations sometimes can just be really helpful and reassuring.
So you talk about some students that sometimes struggle, and you've seen a lot of students that have struggled over the years
Mhm.
and for different reasons. What are some of the signs that typically you see in students that might be struggling? And what are some resources or strategies that you recommend that they seek out?
There's a lot of resources at the university, the Writing Center, number one. Our graduate school tends to be writing heavy. And the style of writing has to be different typically than what you saw in your undergrad. And that can be challenging for students if they haven't done it before. Taking advantage of the Writing Center, taking advantage of the library, and the librarians, they're fantastic. They are so helpful with research. A lot of students will not take advantage of those resources. Like we post them, like here's all of the resources that we have. Here are the people that you can reach out to. Tutoring, like we have tutoring for our anatomy and kinesiology courses for our students in CHS. Um, and sometimes students are afraid for whatever reason, they don't ask for the help until it's too late. It's like, oh, you've already failed an assignment, or you've already, done worse on an exam that you may not have expected. Um, I think taking advantage of those types of resources out of the gate could be very beneficial to your success. And not being afraid to utilize those.
Now, part of the role in getting in and through graduate school is not only to learn the knowledge of the field, but it's also to start to build some of the professional skills, the networking that they need to be ready to go into the field that they're going into. So how important is networking within the department, and even broader than that, the broader academic community, and how can students get started?
Yes, I believe that is very, very important. In OT, we have what's called field work, which would be clinicals or internships for other fields of study. Um, and those relationships that you're building that with your faculty, with your clinical faculty, or the faculty that are setting up those internships for you, and the people that you're doing the internships for out in the broader community are extremely important because those people are going to serve as your references. And for OT, I always tell our students it's a small world, and I think it's probably true for most careers. It is a small world, and so those relationships that you build with those people and those educators are extremely important. They can help you in your future careers. Um, Sometimes it's like, you hear about job openings by like who you know. It's like, hey, I this company's hiring and I think you'd be perfect for it. And I know so-and-so, and here you go. Here's the application. It's really, really important. So always putting your best foot forward in your communication skills, both written and verbal, are really, really important. You don't want to give somebody a bad impression, and the way you communicate. I mean, I've had emails right out of the gate from students that are like their text message. They read like a text message, and that is not sending a professional impression, right? Or I've seen where they've sent their fieldwork educators that we've assigned them to at local hospital systems, the same types of communications. And you just cringe because it's like, oh my goodness, that's their impression of you now. And how are you going to fix that, right? But that's where that networking comes in. I mean, there's so many opportunities that are provided, that you hear about just by people that that can connect you with others. So, um, definitely making sure that your communication is professional. Those soft skills are important. That's what employers are looking for, not only your technical skills in the area of study that you're going into, um, but your soft skills are hugely important.
Now we do have a question in the chat, and I want to bring that in to make sure we don't forget that. Well, this person, Nikki, said, "I've been out of college a long time, and how does one do oral presentations over Zoom? Because there are some of you that are in fully online programs. Julie or Dr. Jacob, I know that your program is pretty much fully in person,
Mhm.
but you did have to deal with COVID,
COVID,
and
yeah.
and we all had to deal with that. Do you have any advice for Nikki over the kind of over oral presentations in a Zoom type of atmosphere?
Yeah, Nikki, I had to do that for my post-professional doctorate program. Because I had an all online post-professional Doctor of Health Sciences, and I worked in groups, and uh my group, my peers were all over the country. Some of them were out of the country for my degree program. And so, you present a PowerPoint just like you normally would typically for an oral presentation. You have it all prepared as if you were going to do it in person. But usually what you do, just like how we're doing the Zoom presentation now today, right? You do a screen share and you'd have your PowerPoint up and you'd have your talking points all. I would usually have my stuff printed out on the side, all of my notes while I'm speaking. In a group, we would rehearse our presentation prior to the actual presentation for the class so that we had our timing down. Because it can be, sometimes you get people who are very wordy, and you might run over on time. And typically in an online class, those time limits are very important for presentations. At least they were for us. Our instructors would just cut us off if we went over. So yeah, rehearsing those, but the media that you're using typically is going to be the same that you would use in a classroom to do, a presentation up on a projector. It's different because like right now I'm looking at all of you and you have your cameras turned off. So I can't see you or your reactions to what we're saying, which can be a little off-putting. I'm just letting you know. When you're doing, you have to kind of get used to that, right? And then making sure you're monitoring the chat, or one of your group members might be monitoring the chat so that you can address questions as they go. It takes a little bit of practice, and it can be, like I said, it's totally different than in-person presentations, but totally doable, and just knowing what the parameters are and working with your group members ahead of time to make sure everybody's on the same page and you have that rehearsal down. I think we have another question related
I
to.
I have no experience with PowerPoint. How do I learn?
Oh
And
boy.
so that,
There.
yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there and
Mhm.
that you can take advantage of. And LinkedIn Learning, there's Coursera courses. I mean, there's a lot of self-paced things that are out there that you can take advantage of to be able to do just that. Dr. Jacob, do you have any other thoughts on that one?
Yeah, YouTube videos. I mean, really, like I've worked with different applications and things. I'm like, I have no idea how I'm supposed to fix this or make this look fancy, and I'll just type it into a Google search and a YouTube video will come up, a 2 or 3 minute YouTube tutorial, and I'm watching that and I'm doing it as I'm going along. Um, There is no shame in that. And there are so many people that have put out videos on how to use like tips and tricks on how to use PowerPoint and Word and Excel. And I mean, you can learn a ton online on how to do that. And even if you didn't want to go on there, it's very user friendly. I mean, they have made these applications like PowerPoint. You go on there, start with a blank presentation, hit the design button, and you just type in your words and it'll actually format the slides for you. It's crazy. They've made it so user friendly now. So don't be anxious about that at all. You'll be fine.
I also see Andrew's asked a question about how can I balance asking a lot of questions as a form of knowledge seeking and but not looking like he's being too knowing or proud.
So asking too many questions.
Hmm. That's what he said. But it may be maybe it's I don't, and Andrews, you can speak to this as well. But maybe what the question really comes down to, and maybe let's answer this one this way first. How can a student balance first asking a lot of questions as a form of knowledge seeking and not looking like they completely don't understand the concept versus putting a lot of information out there and looking like they know so much that they are boasting. Maybe that's what I don't know which way he's
Okay.
going, but
Um, I would caution if you can find the answer to something, or if the answer has already been given to you. For instance, like even in the syllabi, I will get emails and they'll say, can you tell me, they'll ask a question that's clearly in the syllabi. I'm like, you didn't read it. So that you want to make sure that you try to find the answer to your question before you ask the question. If it's something like related to something like that, right? If you're in the middle of a class and you're having a discussion, faculty welcome questions. Um, and sometimes students do know more about a certain topic area because from personal experience or prior education or whatever than the faculty member, and that's okay too. I think that it's great when students are offering more to the conversation. And I would think that faculty members would welcome that. Um, I mean, I think it's all in the way that you present it, right? To all in the way that you're saying something. But yeah, I wouldn't be afraid to ask questions or engage in the conversation or discussion in a class. But like I said, if it is something that probably was in the syllabi or something like that, you might want to check it first before you fire off a question. Um, because yeah, you don't want to look like, oh, I didn't bother to look at that, and I want you to give me the answer without me having to actually go seek it, right? Does that make sense?
it does. So another person asked about, let's see, is every student assigned to a program supervisor, but I'm guessing advisor, and if so, how do I get to see mine? Joseph, I would say that every program does program advisors a little bit differently. So if they're depending on the program that you're in, I would recommend that you reach out to your toward the beginning of the term when you're starting, talk to your program chair, talk to your faculty, and ask the question. Because if they're not telling you up front and saying this is your faculty advisor, there may be a separate process that they go through to match individuals. But every program is different. The way that Dr. Jacob does things in OT is different than the way that they do things in physical therapy, is different than the MBA, is different than the the computer science program. So just realize that every program is just a little bit different in that way. Um, can we share effective strategies for ensuring good working relationships and rapport with a thesis supervisor? So some of our students are going to have either dissertations or theses, and typically you're going to have a chair or a person that you work with directly. And do you have thoughts on that, Dr. Jacob? I know you've had a dissertation chair, just like I have, in
Yep.
regards to building and maintaining that relationship with the person that you're working very closely with on that research.
I think regular communication, again, like it comes down to regular communication. Because I think that will let them know you're working towards that goal, right? You're making progress towards that goal. asking for advice or feedback on different aspects of, depending on where you are at in that process is important. Seeking their input, um, thanking them for feedback, being able to receive the feedback too, because sometimes you get feedback that you're not expecting. I mean, I've had some papers, ripped apart where I just looked at it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that I did not do that right, or this wasn't written in the way that they wanted it written, or I should be, focusing on this aspect, of my project instead. And not taking that personally, because ultimately your success is their success for a thesis or a dissertation advisor. Because their name typically is on it along with yours. Our OT students do what we call capstones. And so I serve as a capstone mentor for our students, and my name goes on their project. And so I want them to be in communication with me. I worry, in fact, when I don't hear from a student for 2 months, or the third month into a semester, and I haven't seen any of their progress, I become very concerned. Like, where are we at with this? What's going on? Are they actually, doing what they're supposed to be doing, or have they procrastinated and now this is going to be, not as great as what it should be? So making sure you're in regular communication with them, and do not be afraid to receive constructive criticism along the way.
All good points. I would completely agree with you on all of those. The other thing that I would put out there is just as you are assigned or find that mentor, that advisor, that chair that you're going to be working with, set the ground rules from the very beginning and identify what those ground rules are. So you're not going to be dictating what the ground rules are, but understanding what the ground rules are is important, and having a frank conversation about what the expectations that chair has of you is going to be important as well. Because you don't want to assume that you completely know what they're expecting of you if they have said yes to mentoring you, working with you. So be having that frank conversation from the get-go is important. Okay, so last question we have in here talks about faculty that may be uncomfortable with some of the digital platforms of communication, such as Zoom meeting and Google Meet, and how do you deal with that? I think that a lot of faculty have gotten pretty comfortable with Zoom and Google Meet. But Dr. Jacob, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a surprising question to me, just because we've all had to learn it. During COVID, we really had no other choice. So that would be surprising if you had somebody that wasn't as comfortable with that. Um, Certainly there can be technical difficulties and technical challenges, especially if you're holding class online. I've had that happen to myself, internet connections and things that didn't go as smoothly as we wanted them to, and that happens. Um, but for the most part, I would think faculty should be pretty comfortable using those platforms. And even for, like, if you're talking about just meetings like Google Meet, and um, they're fairly simple now. I think in your classes, it is important to know what the netiquette expectations are, because each instructor may have different expectations as far as, I require my students to have their cameras on the entire class. I expect them to be, we have a dress code in OT. I expect them to be dressed in our, for at least from the waist up where I can see them, um, in the professional dress code, because we're training them to be professionals. Um, so, to clear distractions and things like that. So I would definitely ask your individual faculty, if you're going to be having online sessions, to ask what those expectations are and make sure that you're meeting those expectations, because believe it or not, your faculty notices. They notice when, I mean, I had a student one time, this is terrible to say, but I had a student one time who literally was getting her hair done while she was in my class. There was a hairdresser behind her, and I just thought to myself, oh my, I was just shocked, right? Like, so don't let that be you. That's not a good impression for your faculty member at all. And that's where that networking things, comes into play as well in your references. Okay, you don't want to stand out in a bad way.
Are there other questions that people have? I'm not seeing others, but I think this has been a great conversation. Dr. Jacob, thank you for all your thoughts today, for sharing all of these and your experiences. This has been wonderful. And
I think Paula has a question. I just saw her raise her hand.
oh, go
Yeah,
ahead,
I
Paula.
do. Yeah, I apologize. I raised it after you started talking. I do have a question. I am starting a master's in educational administration, and how do I get? I I've kind of reached out to my advisor, but and she's given me really good advice. But I've got this thing in my head where I would really like to start reading, and so I look at the two classes that I have to take because it's a year-long program, and I've been going online to read about the subjects, but I would really like to get a syllabus and whatever reading material in whatever form as soon as reasonably possible. How would I go about doing that?
I would suggest so our Office of Digital Education, they typically don't publish our Canvas courses until like the week of classes, which I personally am not a huge fan of because I like to post my stuff in advance. So if you know who your faculty is going to be for that particular course, you can email them directly and
Okay,
ask. Yeah, I would just ask for it to say if you have your syllabi prepared, I want to get a jump start on my readings. I mean, that's a great first impression, if you have a student that is really anxious to get going. But I would reach out to them directly, just shoot them an email and ask if
okay,
they can offer those up. And if it were me, I certainly would, provide that
yeah.
student what they needed.
Great question, Paula. Any other questions? Oh, is it professional to share a student's personal challenges or life challenges with a thesis advisor or faculty member? Andrews, just like I said earlier, if your faculty don't know what's going on, they can't support you. So if you've got a thesis advisor, a dissertation chair, someone that you're working with, if you don't let them know what's going on and things are happening that are going to impact you meeting the deadlines that Dr. Jacob mentioned, or you being able to turn things in when you're supposed to be turning things in, they're just going to expect that it's going to be turned in. And so you need to make sure that you are upfront and talking to them and being willing to divulge what you're willing to divulge. Doesn't mean you have to share everything, but allowing them to at least understand the struggle or what the challenge is so that they can support you in a way that they can support is going to be important.
Yeah, I agree. I think I've had students that have had terminally ill parents when they're going through a program. I've had students who've had, people pass in their life that, or illnesses of family members, or, they're caring for a parent or, a child or whatever. And I think that it's very important that faculty know about that so that we can't make exceptions to everything, but certainly if we know and there's things that we can do to help a student be successful, given all of those special circumstances, most faculty will try to accommodate and offer support and potentially make adjustments, like especially like for internships and things like that. That can be incredibly important if there's, special situations trying to work those types of things out as well. So I would encourage you. I mean, you don't have to give every nitty-gritty detail to a faculty member if you're not comfortable, but those, major life things that are happening that are impacting your success, certainly you'd want faculty to know.
Looks like we've hit all of the questions today. I want to say thank you for everyone for your questions, for being here today. Thank you, Dr. Jacob, for your time today, for sharing your wisdom. And we will be having a few more sessions tomorrow for our final sessions, talking about being a scholarly writer, as well as what you can do to be able to jumpstart your career from the very beginning. So I encourage you to come back. We will be recording all of these and sharing the links afterwards, so you will be able to access them. But thank you for being here today and have a great evening.